The initial training took place when we brought every officer into the station and we trained them for a 4-hour block.
So everybody that's on the beat got this training?
The existing officers, when the law went into effect, got a 4-hour block. The new officers get that training within the academy.
And how do our policies compare to other agencies throughout Pima County? How do we see that?
Very comparable. Our policies have been used as an exemplar by some agencies in the state. Some agencies have their own particular twist to them, but when we first developed these policies, it was developed in conjunction across state between the chiefs and the legal advisors to get together. Each agency may have slight variations, but they're fairly similar.
And you mentioned earlier complaints have been very minimal in filing. Can you educate the community if an individual feels wronged? What are the mechanisms out there that they can use going through TPD, and also there's other outside agencies, if they don't feel comfortable going through TPD, what other mechanisms are out there that are available where a person can file a complaint?
First, I would like to emphasize the proposed change here is really a documentation of our business policy. We have never asked witnesses or victims their status if they want to come report misconduct, but I'm very willing to put that in writing so that we have that and people can feel a little bit more reassured. If they're not comfortable coming to the police department internal affairs, they can also go to the independent police auditor's office as well as the CPAR to voice their complaints about conduct.
Okay, and then outside those, they can go to the Arizona Civil Rights Division, AEOC, correct?
Yes.
Okay, those are still in place for them. And do we have any record of number of complaints that have gone to ACRD or EEOC or any of those in reference to actions against our?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay, and tell me how you are proactive with the community and how you interact with them on issues that neighborhoods, concerns, and issues of this are brought forward to the agency.
We have attended, and I personally have attended several community forums on this topic. The unfortunate thing is it seems like I'm usually the only law enforcement executive that attends those forums, and I get the pleasure of answering for different events that occur throughout southern Arizona. And when I try and explain that, it's usually not received much better than it was received here today.
Thank you, Steve. Mike, do you foresee any other changes in 1070 possibly being stricken? Because it's really, truly a divisive piece of legislation that's really separated or split our community.
Councilmember Cambras, changes could come in two ways. One way would be if the legislator sure was to amend it. I wouldn't put a high percentage of likelihood on that. But with respect to, but over time that could change. And then the other, of course, is through the courts, which is where you've seen the changes being imposed on the legislation following the litigation, and in particular the Supreme Court case. It's difficult to say if additional sections will be invalidated by the courts. I think clearly the Supreme Court left room for additional challenges on other constitutional grounds beyond preemption. And if there are, in fact, cases, and I don't know anything about what's been alleged to have occurred in the South Tucson claim, but if there are cases that raise real questions about Fourth Amendment or seizure, unreasonable detention, etc., then I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see those at least proceed through the court. I can make no prediction on how it would play out because they're fact dependent.
Councilmember, I want to, one more time, Councilmember Wood, Councilmember Cunningham, you want to chime in? And Councilmember Romero, and then we're going to go to a vote.
Thank you.
Wood.
Just in terms of how we move forward as a community, the reason I can speak for my reason for bringing this forward with Councilmember Romero. When the chief is really working primarily with the city attorney and the city manager, I think it puts a challenge on you in terms of definitive direction, because it's the city attorney's job to keep us out of court and to defend us legally. And I think it's our job to work with you to look at the overarching needs of the community to keep everybody safe. And so I just want to look you in the eye and say, we want to keep everybody safe. And I know you agree with that, but if you keep consulting with, and needing to, I understand, recognizing this, we're going to get sued either way, right? That's clear. This will end up back in the Supreme Court eventually. So in the short term, we're trying to figure this out together. We have to take the long view of how we can best support you and not undermine your job with public safety and keeping the community's trust. I guess it makes me want to scream, quite frankly, to say, oh my God, we might end up in court over this, and therefore we better not this, that, or the other. We need to keep this community safe. And I'm concerned. The only way that you can get, I think, the direction you need as a police department, and perhaps either the charter basis or legal basis that we work through with the attorney to say, here's the direction we're taking, see you in court. There is no other path. There's not a path through the manager and the city attorney. So I would suggest that if need be, any one of you, we need to be able to get back to this table to make sure that we're exploring paths that aren't quite as obsessed with the issue of whether or not we're going to get sued, but more obsessed with what ground we're going to be losing, not only now, but in the long term, if the public's confidence and trust is eroded.
Councilmember, I'd like to note that my sole concern is not about whether the city ends up in court or not. I also, as a city attorney, and overseeing not just the civil but a criminal division, have a priority on preserving and protecting and promoting public safety. And in fact, I can remind the council that the council was invited to give us direction to challenge 1070 at the inception, and we did that. So I'll leave it at that for the record.
Councilmember Cunningham.
I suppose it's just about the dialogue that's going to come as a result of the motion. At this time, it's my conclusion that there is a great discrepancy in what the facts are. There is a discrepancy in what the facts are regarding this incident where this man was detained for riding a car. According to the procedures that have been outlined,
I just want to make sure that everyone in the community that's here, on any side, that this is not the finality of this conversation. That this is, as long as SB1070 is not repealed or taken to the Supreme Court and struck down, that these are initial conversations and these are initial steps. I am happy that we have had the opportunity under horrible circumstances, I think, but it's the responsibility, my responsibility, and the responsibility of mayor and council to, when there's something happening, there's questions in the community, that we sit down and that we talk about it and that we give direction in terms of policy and where we want to move forward. What the ACLU recommended to mayor and council, and Chief Villaseñor was there last year, September 25th, at Most Holy Trinity Church, in a forum organized by my office and organized by the city of Tucson and other immigrant rights groups. We had more than 200 people there, and there was recommendations made by the ACLU. The recommendations that, and action steps that I put forward today to my colleagues address the focus on suspect and arrestee rather than on witnesses and victims. It does address the ACLU recommendation of the officers not question juveniles regarding their immigration status without the presence of an attorney or guardian. It does address the recommendations by the ACLU about vehicles being impounded. It does address, and this these actions will be included in the general orders to our troops. In other words, it is our chief of police recommending this to be included in the training for police officers. It also includes additional recommendations that I brought to the table that talks about individuals calling to report allegations of misconduct to TPD or to our independent police auditor. Will not be questions about their legal status. It also includes TPD developing a stop data collection method that tracks demographics and outcomes, because that's very important as this case moves forward. ACLU and other organizations need that information. That stop data is very important to potentially bring SB 1070 back to the Supreme Court of the United States. We will know, and it is only fair, to put together demographic information and how it's affecting our community. Also, it creates an outreach plan for our chief of police to put together to have the community dialogue. This conversation that we're having right now is not the end. It's the beginning. We started this conversation as a mayor and council 2 years ago when we said we do not agree with SB 1070. And by the way, we will sue the state because we don't agree so much. So we will continue, as long as SB 1070 is the law of Arizona, we will continue to have this dialogue. And it does not mean that as we continue the dialogue, we're all going to fall in the same place. But we can have sensible dialogue and sensible policy as we move ahead to work around SB 1070 and what we have in front of us. So I feel, and ACLU and other community members are invited to the Immigrant Welcoming Task Force meetings, because that is where the dialogue will continue to happen. And so I'd like to ask one final question, Mr. Rankin. When will these general orders be changed, and when will they take effect as they come back? Do they have to come back to Mayor and Council? Does our chief just put them together and send them to the troops? What's the process?
Councilmember Romero, they don't have to come back to the mayor and council. They are the policies of the chief of police. I will work immediately with the chief to get those moving as quickly as possible.
And then I also like to make sure that as we move ahead with an outreach plan, that does come back to us so that we can be informed what your plans are as you move ahead. And then that community members that are here and otherwise, that we share the next Immigrant Welcoming Task Force meeting and where it's going to take place with the community, so that people can show up, and of course our chief show up and bring anyone, including our city attorney, that should be part of the conversation.
Okay, before we take the vote, I'm going to do this after the vote, but I want to sum up for everybody here. Everybody needs to remember that Tucson sued the state over SB 1070. And as a result, the Supreme Court struck down almost all of SB 1070. But until SB 1070 is repealed, our police are between a rock and a hard place when it comes to what's left of 1070. And our challenge, our job at this table is to find some daylight between that rock and that hard place. What we're doing here today, if this motion passes, is to see where we can prevent some of the worst effects of the law, which is the having of a chilling effect on community police relations. It is likely and probably undoubtedly has resulted in police people being afraid to report crimes at certain times. And we want to see if we can prevent that. But for everybody in this room, we have to remember that first and foremost, not only is this a state problem because it first started here in the state of Arizona, but it's also a federal problem. We need comprehensive immigration reform. And in the meantime, we will do all we can at this table legally to reduce the harmful impact of this misguided law. So with that, I'm going to call the question.
I'll just go through one final thing.
Yeah.
How many committee members do you have? 900 or something or other?
We are actually authorized 998, we have about 907.
Okay, and I just gotta say for the record, I don't believe anybody at this table, probably anybody in this room thinks we got 970 roll cops running around. It's a lousy law.
Okay, we've got a motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.